Alright, today we're going to be replacing the master cylinder on the Rabbit project. Now, if you haven't followed the project, I'll have a link to the playlist at the end of the video. But until then, things we're going to need. We're going to need a socket set. I'm going to tell you this much flat out right now. Number one, this is actually the second time I'm making this video. The first time I actually made it, I had the wrong master cylinder, so I was unable to complete it. So this is actually all taken apart before, so I actually know exactly what tools you're going to need. Grab yourself a long extension and a swivel for these 15mm nuts on the brake booster. Now, for some people, they're still going to have some problems, especially on this side with the pipe plug on some vehicles. So I would recommend you get just a standard wrench set so that you can do that side. Set of flare nut wrenches. Ironically, the set of SAE that is the 7/16 end is the one you want. Now, that brings up another point. There are two different master cylinders for this vehicle, and you pretty much got to take it apart to know which one you got. And no, you cannot modify the one to fit. So there is two master cylinders for this vehicle. There is this one with this long extension that comes out. Another thing about this one is that the bolt pattern is actually smaller than the one that is not. So, even if you took apart your other one or took a hacksaw and hacked this off, it would still not work. So keep that in mind. Alright, long extension. Now I will show you the one that goes to this vehicle. The one that goes to this vehicle does not have that. It's still a 6-port design, but it does not have that extension piece that comes off of it. Plus, you can clearly see in the camera that this flange is a lot wider. So keep that in mind. There's a actual bolt and screw combination that goes in here and pushes on the piston. You'll see that when we start tearing into this thing. So I think enough of the blabbing, and we're gonna set the masters off to the side. We're gonna set our brake fluid off to the side. Will you need a gallon? Probably not, but at least get one of the bigger sized small jugs. Now, when I was putting this back together, I wanted to make sure that the fluid didn't leak. So I Tefloned the fittings just to ensure that I knew, and did that with some high temperature thread sealant. Okay. Now, remember, these lines are unless you've replaced them, these lines are 40 plus years old. Like, such as this one's an 81, so yes, this one's 40 years old. Say you've got one that's newer, you know, you're still looking at, when did they quit making the Mark 1? 90? So you're looking at over 30 years old on these lines. So now, the one thing, if you can do it, you know, you're not in a time crunch, you can actually wait, hose the entire system down with penetrant and just keep doing that over the course of a week, and these will actually be able to be removed a lot easier. Now remember that you are going to be working around brake fluid, so I'm going to shut the camera off for a minute. I'm going to pull these lines off, and I'm going to bring it back when I start pulling the nuts for the master, okay? Because I really want to show you folks that brake booster and how it's set up in there. Alright, we're back. I've got all the lines off, so all I gotta do is show you folks that putting this long extension in here, this is where the swivel comes into play, is this pipe plug right here on the side. Side. And we're making progress. So, here's another thing to think about. When you're pulling this off, there's a rod in here that's going to try and come with it. If it comes out, you have to put that thing back in before you can slide your new master cylinder on. Now, these lines will continue to drip until that reservoir is empty. Just a fact of life. Now, be careful. And your master cylinder should slip right out. Now, on the new master cylinder, you're going to have to pull these pipe plugs out of this one. Note the location and put these pipe plugs into the new master. Now, if you've got an 8-point socket set, you can do it with an 8-point socket set. Unfortunately, I do not own an 8-point socket set, so we're just going to be doing it with a pair of pliers. Alrighty. Now, realistically, folks, I'm not saying grab onto the reservoir, because it's harder than heck to find a new reservoir for these things. And that's another thing that you're going to have to transfer is the master cylinder reservoir. So, now if you're doing this before you put the master cylinder reservoir onto the new master cylinder, keep in mind that these rubber these rubbers are where the master cylinder reservoir plugs in. So, just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. Now, we took it out of this port, that means this port. So, what am I going to do? I'm going to take some thread sealant. Now, I would highly recommend the liquid versus the tape. Over the fact the tape can get dislodged and run itself into the internal of the master cylinder, causing you to have master cylinder problems. Now, technically, do I need sealant? That is the question of the hour of the day. Because realistically, the compression fit should be enough, but you know, think of airlines on your air compressor. Do you really want to have it leak? Now, at this point, this is actually the point where you want to inspect your brake booster. So we're going to take the master cylinder, the old one, out, set that down, and we're going to look in here. I'm going to get you all focused in here, folks. That screw that's coming out of the center here, it's actually a shaft. Now it can come out, so you got to kind of feel around and get it back in if it does decide to come out. Another thing about this that you do not want to overlook is the fact that you should be greasing this shaft. Now, I am not going to do something over the top. Just a little dab. And I'm going to coat the shaft. This prevents a lot of premature wear. So, you could do it with assembly grease, but regular Moly fortified grease should be just fine. So, I'm going to put the new pipe plug in. Then I'm going to come back when I got the reservoir on the old one empty, and I'm going to show you how to install that from the old one. Alright, be right back. Alright, now you want to do this is you want to gently without any tools, preferably, pop these out. Gently but firmly pull it out. Now, you can check your old master cylinder in the box if you've got a core return. Now, you remember, it goes forward. The filler goes forward. So, what does that mean? It goes just like that. And there we go. And you will hear it click. So, there's the new one all ready to be put in. I even put a touch of grease in the hole, so we'll see how that goes here in a second. And we're just gonna line it, slide that out of the way, and there we go. Now, put the nuts on fingy tight. You don't ever want to cross thread these, or else you're going to have to replace your master cylinder. Then we take a ratchet, hopefully, now, as you can see, you really got to get this thing in there at, whoa! Be careful of the battery cable. Just remember, your tools are metal. I tell you, always be safe, be careful, because things like that can happen to you. So, now, before we go putting any of the lines on, we're going to put some brake fluid in the master cylinder and see if we can get it to come through the ports that are open. Now, we might not be able to. We may have to let it sit for a little bit, get it nice and wet in there, and pump the brakes just enough to get the fluid through. Make sure that your master cylinder reservoir is full before you attempt to push on the pedal. So, just a word of caution. And I would not give it more than 2 pumps at a time before checking to make sure that you have fluid in the master cylinder. Alright, we got fluid coming out of this port, a little bit of fluid coming out of that, a lot of fluid coming out of that one. Yep. So now this is where the decisions have to be made. Do you use your thread sealer on your fittings? Typically, this is a tapered fit into it, so realistically you do not have to, but for my peace of mind of knowing that these things ain't gonna actually rust in, I actually kind of put this on not so much for the sealing properties as the rust preventative aspect of it, because you got to think about it like this, folks. Brake fluid is very corrosive. So, and you might have to jiggle the lines a little to get it started. And folks, you should be able to get these to almost bottom out before you have to tighten them with a tool. So, you know, just prevent cross-threading and all that jive by doing that. Okay, so like I can see that I'm going to need to put more brake fluid in this. Now, this is also the time that you may want to convert from a .4 to a .3 or a .5. Realistically, I wouldn't convert to a .5, but I would say maybe if you have more .3 around in your area, get the DOT3 versus the DOT4. A car such as this does not, in my opinion, does not need the DOT4. This is not a hot rod. This is an economy car. So that is another decision you have to make at this point, because when you're bleeding the system, you should really bleed out all the old fluid from the old master cylinder. So realistically, folks, I'm going to hook this thing back up, and then we're going to go for an outro. Alright, we're back. We got to get more fluid in the master cylinder. We're down to about here after hooking up the lines, and we're going to see. Okay, this is why you put more fluid in and then check, because your lines might not be that tight. So this is a good time to check them. So Now, in some ways, this will naturally bleed itself, but since you've just opened up the master, now you've got to open up all of your secondaries or slave cylinders. So in order for this car, it would be the passenger rear first, the driver's rear second, the passenger side front third, and your driver's front last on this car, because that is the order of which this system has the lines. You always want to bleed from longest to shortest. That is the key figure here. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. So I'm going to cut it here because we'll pick this up on a bleeding video. But thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.